So I'm back with Mr. Jonathan Demir. I think if I do publish this on my channel, it'll be Neal/Jonathan 1. But I think this is like the third conversation that we've had that's recorded. I think. But it's been over a year since we had a recorded conversation. And I think the last time we talked, yeah, it was before Midwestuary, and then obviously got to actually meet each other a little bit at Midwestuary, which is awesome. And seeing the estuary road trip gear and setup and vehicle and all that fun stuff. So yeah, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, no, it's good to do another conversation. It's been too long, and yeah, I'm glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, and we were talking about like right before hitting record, just the wildness in the world right now. Something occurred to me this morning because I knew we'd probably chat, and I think I was in the shower, and I had you in my mind as like the wise men, like the astrologers,
Oh man,
and I'm like,
I'm,
what are the like what is the star charts? What do they tell us of our current time?
it's crazy. Yeah, no, these are crazy times, and I don't know if that's a sincere wondering, but I'm always down to talk about astrology. But yeah, it's true. It's crazy. Well, the main thing is that there. I don't know. I could go. I have to like, I always feel like I have to restrain myself because I'm speaking astrologically, I have a lot of Sagittarius energy with my rising sign. So in astrology, the big three are the sun, moon, and your rising sign, which is like what was on the horizon when you were born. And I don't know, I can be a little bit like extra about like, oh, this is what I believe in, this is the way things are, and everyone should agree with me. So I have to contain myself with astrology because I am very passionate about it. I really think it's important and like um, stuff like that. So, but
How
anyway,
how
yeah,
how does somebody else asked me this, but I was like, that's a really good question. Like twins with different personalities.
yeah,
How
yeah,
does that make sense in
yeah.
astrology?
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah. Did I was it Jameis?
No.
Okay,
No.
because I recorded a conversation with Jameis actually not long ago, and he is a twin, and we were talking about this very thing. And so the two things that I would say is that one is that the ascendant, which like this kind of axis stuff like changes very quickly, so it's more even just like a couple minutes can have a difference in the by a couple of degrees, and that could affect like the precise aspects. But more so, I would say that it's just kind of a proof of how astrology is not deterministic because um, even if two people have the same chart and are born at the same moment and stuff, then because they're born at the same moment, the way that they if we kind of think about this as like the complexes, I know you're into Jung and stuff, so it's also kind of like internal family systems, right? So it's like these various sub aspects of who we are. Um, the way that you relate to those and whether or not you relate to them intentionally and like the life experiences in particular that happen to you, you know, at various times, like really have an impact on the way that these archetypes are like unfolded, so it's like you could have many expressions of Jupiter and Cancer, um but and yeah, so and the type of life experiences and the choices you make will kind of affect those expressions. Yes. Yeah.
How have you found it to be helpful in your own life, in your own journey?
Well, um I it's kind of like the idea that like we live in a story and like it's important that we relate consciously to that story is kind of, or like that's what would be my contention, my humble contention, that uh just like we have to like it's important that we acknowledge like what season it is like before we plan an outdoor event, or and just like it's important that we acknowledge that we're like coming out of the enlightenment and stuff like that, and that we're in the time between the crucifixion and the New Jerusalem or something, although I would maybe contend that the New Jerusalem is more of like this ever-present pattern in a way. But in a sense, that's a complex topic though. Uh, that it's kind of like just to see to realize that there is kind of a coherent flow of time and like a structure to the way that things unfold. You know, like it's
And
uh, yeah,
and that we're not like, I'm gonna bring Jung into this, but that we're not masters of our own destiny, so to
yeah,
speak.
that's a big part of it
That
too.
we can't sorta top down Ubermensch, um, everything.
Mhm.
And if we're gonna surf the waves, it helps to know which way the wind is blowing
Yeah, that's
and what the conditions of the ocean are.
I think so. I think that's a good analogy, and also just like, I don't know, most people are interested in natal charts and, like, in a general sense, people just think about sun signs, like what sign your sun was in, what month you were born in, essentially. Um, but what's more interesting to me is the transit astrology of, like, time, like, these like, what is going on right now for everyone. However, I would also say that the birth chart astrology has been very helpful for me, and like I'm very convinced that like it's kind of a if you understand your birth chart and then the way that the transits, like what's going on now, is kind of in relation to your birth chart, then I find like sometimes we get swept up in I would kind of associate astrology with like feelings and desires and stuff and like psychological dispositions and impulses and things like that. So it's like sometimes we get caught up in those things, but then to notice, be like, oh, there's some difficult aspect to this particular thing. Not only it's not just to say, oh, it's all in my head, but it helps you to understand the nature of like what type of issue you'll be caught in. And I think in that sense, I don't suggest that anyone kind of take my word for it. I think like if people really look into astrology and like kind of see how it um uh sorry, I just got a message. If people really look into it and see how sorry, I'm very distracted by that message. Uh
I could pause it for a moment. We did.
okay.
Yeah. So we're back after, after Jonathan had to take care of something. Um, and, we were just talking about how, like, I'm pretty confident that me talking about astrology with Jonathan is gonna I think I said piss off, but is gonna irritate a significant portion of the people who watch me and my channel. And I said to Jonathan, I'm like, "You know, I'm grateful that A, it does that, and that B, that I'm so grateful that Jonathan's part of the TLC." And I think it's not even something that I can really put into words. Um, but I know that this vision of Christianity as this closed box that either you're in or you're out, and these are the precise set of axioms and dogmas that you need to be saved. And that idea of like that idea of the closed box is dead. It is done. And we are being influenced, and this is something where Jonathan Pajot really helped me understand this, that and Jung first. It was Jung and then Pajot after him, that we are being influenced all the time by the spirits of the age. Like when there's a catastrophic event in the culture, I feel the spirit of that. Like I feel the weight on it. And as Christians, we do have tools for that. Like we really do have tools, but there are other perspectives that I think we need in order to not react, um, in order to not react in such a way that's going to be detrimental to everyone and everything. The idea of like first do no harm, or the idea is if someone asks you for your coat, give them your cloak as well. Um, anyway, these are ideas within Christianity that I think we like to pay lip service to, but when when the rubber meets the road, I think that's what really makes us Christians is that beyond we're willing to trust the spirit of something and not the form of something. And so I said to you, Jonathan, that like whenever I've interacted with you in the past or and in person, like you're extremely respectful in every way, and I admire the way you conduct yourself, your openness, but also your receptivity um, to ideas, and you're grappling, you know, you're wrestling with how you see God, and I admire that a lot. So
Thank you,
yeah,
Neil. Thank
yeah,
you. I really appreciate that. And I have lots of respect for you as well. I'm always skeptical of people when they first show up in the corner, so it took me a little bit to get over that with you. But I think, more and more I really, I appreciate your place in the TLC as well. I think you bring a certain energy and kind of liveliness and showmanship, almost, I would say, which is like artfully beautiful, and I really appreciate it. So right back at you.
I think something that's flipped for me in the last few years is that, you know, with Peterson, and this might be something that we can talk a lot about because I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, but you know, with Peterson back in 2016, 2017, uh, he came at postmodernism as like postmodernism is the enemy. You know, the being able to, you know, deconstruct all these edifices of Western civilization, like that's the problem. And something flipped for me just in the last 2 or 3 years where I realized that like we are in this the best way I can convey this now is my realization that like we are in the storm. You know, like the fighting against postmodernism was the equivalent of like let's take our boat and as the storm's approaching, like let's turn around and go in the opposite direction. And maybe that made sense while the storm was still approaching. But the problem is like we are now in the storm. Like we are now in the middle of it, the thick of it, and like running away from the storm as it's like behind us, like it's the wrong approach. It's the wrong attitude. We got to go straight through it. We got to go like straight through the postmodernism, which is something like you get to the point where you can't deconstruct anything else. And the things that I can't deconstruct are things like pain, friendship, faith, love, hope, the necessity of hope, um, and get down to the absolute bedrock of like what we need to still function well, I would say. And that's where I am. Like I think what I'm trying to do is use postmodernism as a way of showing the absolute ridiculousness of attempting to live without faith. Like the how ridiculous it is to put our stock in physical materialism. Like we need faith. And I'm more certain than that than ever. I'm more certain of that than ever.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Um, oh my gosh, yeah, there's a lot, uh, that could be said, I think. Like, I definitely agree that, like, the way is through and not like, um, I think it's basically the the story of Christ, like, on a grand scale, actually, where there's, like, a death and rebirth, and, like, you have to go through the full U-shaped journey, like, and that part of that is, I think, the kind of postmodern thing about the importance of personal experience and like the individual and stuff, where like we have to recognize that. Um, I actually think postmodernism is kind of um, opposite to materialism in a sense, but there's like these disturbing hybrids that show up or something, um, where like to really value to say that my experience matters and my first person encounter of the world is not arbitrary or kind of like dismissible, like that we have to take you know our personal truth, is the way that they often put it, but it's really like um my experience of God, you know, the God of your own understanding kind of, is kind of the only real God in a sense, but then like there's a thing about how to go through that is to see how like the whole is reflected in the particular. It's like something about how we all like through each person being who they really are as an individual and being a really autonomous kind of like not autonomous like separate, but like a person with real agency as an individual and creative agency, then like through everyone participating in that, that's what really allows for kind of that's the way in which we see the transcendent God, which is shared amongst everyone or something like that. I'm not sure if I'm articulating that quite right, but just the whole idea that like yeah, we can't get stuck in postmodernism. We have to kind of like go through it, Yeah.
Yeah, no, the piece what you said about the personal is primary, that was a major realization for me that, I no matter what I believed about the physical material world is that it was always first and foremost through my subjective lens. Like I the way I thought of that at the time when I had the realization was it's the objective subjective. Like it's the objective reality of my subjective experience. And all of us have that, the objective reality of our subjective experience. And no matter what I go through, whether it's pain or joy or this or that, there is the objective of however those things are affecting me. And in one way, it's like it's very self-centered in that it's like placing the self at the center of the universe. But in another way, like you in some ways you have to be that because so you are at the center of your universe. And the reason that is because like light travels at the speed of light to your eye. Your eye only receive that to the extent a star is within the distance that it takes the light to actually receive your so like no matter what happens to you, you are actually the center of the universe. So that like old adage of uh, Earth being the center of the universe is actually true.
Yeah, kinda
It is actually true in terms like it really is in terms
yeah.
of that primacy of your subjective phenomenology that you're only perceiving things in relation that they're happening on Earth, you know?
Yeah, and
So
it's not to say that the Earth isn't orbiting the sun, but it's also to say that the sun is orbiting the Earth, and, like, it's we have to be able to hold this kind of paradox or something like that. It's a lovely tie-in back to our conversation about astrology, but there's really so much that could be said about that. Like, I think the kind of I actually think that that's really what the whole enlightenment and the trend excuse me, the trend into science, like empiricism, where we're trying to like investigate our experiences of and like phenomenology and stuff like that to try and uncover it's kind of like Gnosticism as well, where it's like I want to personally know the nature of reality. So, oh gosh, I don't want to lose my train of thought here. The that uh uh gosh, I'm losing it. Okay, yes, that our if we try and take this abstract view, like the view of God or like the view of
view from nowhere.
the view from nowhere, or like even just kind of the authority of scripture, I would say, or the authority of the priest hierarchy, like then we kind of start to lose touch with our um, like the immediacy of experience or something like that. Like things start to become abstract and kind of like um, like kind of brittle or something. But like so the whole trend over the past like 1,000 years or so has been to I think to balance the authority of others with the authority of personal experience, and like and that we need to um and that we have to encounter the world through our own eyes, in because I'm reminded of a clip on my channel where Peugeot was talking about the Copernican revolution, and he was talking about how like do we talk about water as H2O, or do we talk about water as wet and refreshing, and cleansing and stuff. And I think it just depends on the context, the circumstance that you're in, it's like and like what you're trying to accomplish, and like making sure that you're not oppressing kind of one of those two poles, it's like we have to be able to honor kind of the I don't know, yeah, these are big topics. But yeah, I anything you have to say there?
Now there's something I was thinking about in relation to Jung, um, but I forgot it. It left. It's okay. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
But mhm.
I could say I kind of want to finish that thought about astrology,
Sure.
which was cool, which is that what was I saying in particular? Uh I was kind of answering the question of how I found it helpful, and I don't remember exactly what I was saying about it.
Yeah, I was curious how you saw it guiding your life or assisting you in your life.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and I was talking about how like to under to to interpret, or it's like to not get stuck in these kind of desires or feelings or complexes like so much. It helps to like identify these kind of uh, things that we get stuck in a more um, I don't know. There's so much that could be said about astrology. It's a really big topic, I think, but it can be unhelpful. I should say that as well. It can be like, if you're always like, oh, looking at um, charts and stuff, and like, being pre-planning things, and like, I think that the thing that's really was thrown away with astrology, with good reason, was the kind of soothsaying and fortune telling aspect, or like, and also there's like a certain type of astrological magic which can be bad, like trying to use astrology to accomplish my personal aims, you know? Like, there's some truth in that insofar as we were just talking about the importance of the personal in a sense, but like, and that my aims participate in, like it's really about how is my will connected with God's will, and it's like, am I, like we kind of, yeah. So those are some things that I think are important to avoid, like the kind of astrological um, magic of trying to obtain your desires, like your personal desires, um, or like trying to predict precise outcomes, or like stuff like that, because that's not really how it works. It kind of will tell you the types of things which will happen, but not like the particular things, and so.
The way yeah, here's maybe an analogy that comes to my mind. It's like, let's say you're a tribe and you're your future is dependent on like weather patterns, the patterns of like where lakes and rivers are going or drying up, or and also where the wildlife are going. There are subtle cues in the environment, you know, subtle cues in the atmosphere, the way things are going, where you could sort of pick up on now's the time to go, or now's the time to do this, or now's um yeah, and I can imagine like the few people in the tribe who are like highly attuned to those patterns being absolutely essential to the tribe's survival. You know, Jordan Hall actually talked a lot. I really like this heuristic that Jordan Hall had, which I forget how he the word for it, but someone can put it in the comments. But he said there's a time where like everything's going well, everything's okay, like this is a time to build or a time to, and then there's the time where you know the herds are thinning and the weather's changing and this all these things are happening, and it's you know anxiety and other things go up because people sense that it's you know things are not the same as they were,
Mhm.
and then there has to be a way when those patterns are detected to a be able to navigate those patterns, Mark Lefebvre, and b uh well, I would say be able to recognize that there is a change, and then b know what to do. Sometimes the what to do part is the real question, or I think it's almost always the real question. Like with everything going on politically, I've been thinking to myself like, um, I've been thinking about various lenses of it, and one, and analyzed myself and say like, why why haven't I been compelled to get more involved or to do more, speak more, or do this or do that, and the first one, this is kind of my surface layer analysis, is something like, I'm pretty confident anything I do will do more harm than good. And it's kinda like being in quicksand, or actually the example I used on deconstructing my deconstruction was, a mosh pit. Like, when you if you try to have a plan in a mosh pit, the mosh pit is not the time for a plan, you know? And yeah, if you stand outside the mosh pit, you can have a plan.
Mhm.
And and so it's, I think it's something like that. Uh but I think there's one level beyond that, which is like kind of that intuitive layer of waiting for instructions. Like
Mhm.
when I have an intuition that it's time to do this, or it's time to go, or it's time to, like, I've had those intuitions at various times in my life, and like I'm I'm relatively confident that I will know when it's time to take action, when it's time, you know, and whatever that action is. So I don't know. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that one of the things that reminds me of is like the Kairos terminology versus like Chronos, where it's like there's things things happen, there's like the right time for certain things, not just in a chronological sense, but in like, I don't know, that's one thing. But then another thing it reminds me of is like then another thing, like when the herds are thinning, let's say, is it's good to have some sort of reassurance that that time will end, like when people look at the things going on uh nowadays, like I think a lot of it um like does kind of map or is reflected in the stars, and so you can see how like certain trends are like, for example, we just came out of Capricorn season and now we're in Aquarius season. The sun has moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, and like, so for the past like month it was more about Capricorn, which is like the hard work and the labor and like making money and rising, being respected and like stuff like that. And now excuse me, there's a different vibe, you know? So it's like to know that it's not like just like with winter, for example, like if you find yourself in winter and then you're like, "Oh my god, uh, when is this gonna end?" Then what you do is you look at the calendar, you know, and like the calendar, you know, based on the calendar, like that it's not gonna end. And like I think that's kind of a, or I mean, that it's not gonna end, that it will end soon, you know, and that it's not gonna
But
end.
but I'm sure you get these little cycles and these medium cycles and these big cycles,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Feels
yeah.
to me like we're in a big one now. I don't know how big.
Yes, yeah, I think so too. And like ultimately, I do like the terminology of like the age of Aquarius and stuff, and I think that maps in um, in the way kind of described by Carl Jung, except differently. Like I was just talking about the kind of balancing function of the past 1,000 years, and I think that's the age of Pisces. Excuse me, and that the new age is arriving, and like particularly right now in Aquarius season when the sun is in Aquarius, and there's all sorts of other stuff happening in Aquarius right now. It's kind of indicating another turning point in that transitionary period, and so I think to have that kind of framing of the situation, it really helps to not be, to have a narrative just in general. Like I think also like to understand how these are the historical consequences of the crucifixion, kind of in a way, and like the event, the Christ event, and it's still unfolding. Like to have these to have that story, and to have the story about Aquarius and the age of Aquarius and Pisces and stuff, like it makes things less confusing. It's like I can look around and be like, "Oh yes, we are in the end times," or something like that. Like that's kind of a bold one to say, but I do think that's kind of I do think that's the case to some extent. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think we're probably in a 500-year event right now. I think it's on par with like Protestant Reformation, printing press. Maybe bigger than that. It's possible. It might be equivalent to like the invention of agriculture.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that. Yeah, I think in a sense we're like coming out of the fall in a sense, like because of the Christ event. Is like I'm kind of deferring to Steiner terminology here, Rudolf Steiner, where like he talks about the Christ event as like the turning point of time, and like such that it's, I do see it as like the, like it won't be surpassed in a sense. I do still think there will be further evolutions and like probably prophets as well, but they would be prophets of Christ, and um, people who help us to better understand Christ. Like right from the very beginning, like people didn't understand what happened with Jesus. Like he's multiplying the loaves and the fishes and stuff, and not just the miracles, but just like in his, so much about his life is just kind of crazy. So it's like it's going to take us a long time to unpack that, I think, and 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 yeah, so I think that to have that kind of interpretive framework, basically what I'm saying is I don't think the age of Aquarius is going to be putting Christianity behind us. I think that it's just kind of a next, it's like basically it's that we had a one-sided interpretation of it for 1,000 years, and then we had to like counterbalance that. It's like shadow repression, like how the shadow erupts from the unconscious, and then now we're kind of hopefully coming around to a more nuanced understanding of it and moving forward. But I also think it's very much like about people developing, like I don't think that a person's consciousness in 2,000 years ago was the same as it is now. I think now we have a much more clear and distinct sense of being individuals, and I think that's directly because of kind of the Christ events and like the spread of Christianity and stuff, you know? And so, yeah, I
No,
think
I'm with you on that. The more I read the Gospels, the more I see modern individuality in Christ. Um, that it's like so much of what Christ does, it pits the individual and like their authentic choices from their heart against the grain or against their family or against the established traditional ways of doing things. Like
mhm,
so much. Maybe like half of what Christ does is in that category. Um, it's like I could give like 5 things that just come to my mind immediately. You have the Samaritan woman at the well. You're not supposed to talk to women at the well, certainly not a Samaritan. She's there in the middle of the day because she has had 5 husbands, and the other women are most likely shunning her. And so that's one example. There's another woman who's like yelling at his apostles, and they go to Jesus and they're like, "Hey, make this woman go away." And he doesn't say anything. And then, he even uses Jesus uses the closest thing to a racial slur against this woman. He's like, "Yeah, it's not right for me to give food to the dogs," or something like that. And she's like, "Yeah, but even the dogs eat the scraps from the master's table." And it's like the best comeback in biblical history. And then Jesus is like, "Your faith is made." I think it's her daughter that she's asking him to heal.
mhm.
And the tenacity of it. And then, who is my brother? Who is my sister? My brother and my sister is the one who does the will of the Father. Um, the rich young ruler that it comes to him and says, "What must I do to inherit the kingdom?" And Jesus says, "Well, you got to love God, you got to love your neighbor, you got to do this." He's like, "Yeah, I'm doing all that." And Jesus is like, "Give up everything you have and come follow me." And the guy walks away, crestfallen, sad. And so like so much of Jesus's ministry is about like you have to choose the authenticity, the individuality. And like there's way more than just what I just said. That's just what popped in my mind right now. Um, so like I'm with you that like I don't see any other way but through. It's not like we're gonna go back to a traditional society where we aren't individuals anymore. And there's even like biblical prophecy about this, like serious biblical prophecy. I think it's in Jeremiah, but there's a line that says, uh, "I will write the law on their heart. I will write the law on their heart, and they will be my people, and I will be their God." Um, And it's
Yeah,
kind of there's kinda like a move out of adolescence there because, like, as a child, you're basically following the rules of your parents in the household,
yeah,
and you don't really know why all those rules are there, but you're basically, like, trusting, like, the 280 rules in the Old Testament or something like that. It's like, "Okay, we're just gonna trust God of with all these rules." And then the move to adulthood is something like, "Okay, kid, like, we gave you this framework. Hopefully, you've internalized it, like, you've imprinted this framework on your heart, and now hopefully you're ready to start living out just embodied without like consulting the diary of all the or the scroll of all the rules all the
yeah,
time. um and of course we're like stumbling along the way and we're messing up all over the place, but that's like where Jesus says like the greatest commandment is love God and love your neighbor as yourself, and the whole of the commandments are summed up into this one thing, which is like a cross, because love God is the vertical and love your neighbor as yourself is the horizontal. um and I feel like today I'm kind of taking this in a different avenue, but kind of today the issue is that we have forgotten the love of God is first. We've forgotten that. And so we're taking the crossbar and we're just like, you must love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Why aren't you loving? It's like, oh, I know why you're not loving. It's because y'all have forgotten about Dre. Nowadays, everybody like to say that they remember God, but they forgot about Dre. Yeah. So
I don't know that
I'm
one.
not being ridiculous, but seriously, we forgot about the vertical. We
Yeah,
forgot to humble ourselves first
yeah, yeah, yeah,
before we attack our neighbor for having a beam in their eye that we hit them with that beam.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's very well said. Um, yeah, there's so much there. Um, yeah. Um, One of the things the kind of analogy that struck me is like learning to play the piano or something. It's like you have to think the experience of it is totally different when you're learning and you're kind of like you're thinking about the movements and like you're taking instruction from others, but then once you like gain the skill, then you can read music and like play, without thinking about your finger movements. And you could still take instruction from others, but it's like a different. And what I'm saying is that like that's just a mode of consciousness evolution. It's like people are experiencing. Yeah, it's like the word of God, that prophecy you mentioned. It's that like it's Christ taught to like basically pray and make yourself available to the will of God, also in kind of a Marian way of like this kind of feminine receptivity to God and alignment and stuff and that voice of intuition in yourself. And Steiner talks about how the evolutionary process we're going through, like part of it is developing imagination, inspiration, and then intuition. And like that this is that I think that's very much what is up right now. It's not about our jargon about this stuff. It's about developing these faculties and these relational capabilities. Like another thing that was coming to mind was OG Rose talking about like encounterology and how what we really need in order to have a proper pluralism is a kind of logic of encounter where or like a to do a live discernment in the moment with the person about like what's kind of contextually appropriate and stuff. And this gets into the whole thing about how there aren't really objective or subjective like laws or rules insofar as like there aren't many rules that you can apply universally across the board, because it's very circumstantial and stuff. So the rule that you could apply is to be circumstantial, is to like be in touch with your context, which is what Christ is teaching. He's saying to love, he's saying to like open yourself to the encounter and to see the divine spark in whoever you're talking with, regardless of their ideology or their background or whatever. So it's and like to let your preconceived notions die on the cross so that you can, be in touch with the real and stuff like that. So that's what I think is meant by Christianity. It's like yeah.
This is from St. Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 9:22. I'm going to insert something in there, but to the weak I became as weak so that I might gain the weak. To the postmodern I became postmodern so that I might gain the postmodern.
Yeah,
I am made all things to all men that by all means save some. I love that last line. It's like I become all things to all men that I may by all means save some.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's an interesting thing with the internet. I always think about that insofar as right now we're talking to each other, but we're also talking to like everyone in a sense, like everyone on earth, kind of, or English speakers, I guess. But um and that reminds me of eurythmy in terms of like the universal language of body language and intonation and stuff like that, and gesture but that's a whole different thread. Like the uh how do we like make ourselves the way to polish yourself and be a mirror to everyone to be is to just be like um if you are just like a direct window to God, then like what people see when they encounter you is exactly what they need to see in that moment, because God is always kind of trying to tell us exactly what we need to hear, and we just have to kind of open ourselves to it. So it's like um yes, I like that as well. And like there's so many categories which we demonize, like Gnostics. We have to become Gnostic in order to in order to like we have to be able to be one with the Gnostic in order to kind of bring them into like the Christian story is one that encompasses everything. It's like every person is part of the body in my thinking. It's like very much a mystical kind of he is the head which is organizing all these things, and like we're either aware of that or not. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read Paul Kingsnorth's The Machine. I think I'm hesitant to want to read it. Two reasons. One is like everybody's read it now, so I don't want to explore map territory really. But the second reason is that like I have issue that like all the world is fallen or is, that like the Gnostic. I I would wanna understand, and I could probably just look this up, but where Paul Kingsnorth is not a Gnostic. I guess he would say everything that's of the land and everything that's pure and organic and whole is holy. And I don't know, man. I don't think God works that way. Meaning, I don't think God works in these absolutes where it's like these categories are completely like fallen and depraved, and like these categories are completely good and wholesome.
Mhm.
Uh I don't get me wrong. There are some things that are completely depraved.
Mhm. But
Like
God,
I'm not disputing that evil
but
is a thing.
but
It is
al
a thing.
yeah, but always God uses these kind of deviations for his ultimate creative purposes, or, you know,
Yeah.
and like there any sort of thing which goes wrong will be kind of turned into good in some way, like it's crazy. And that's just something that's one of the things that really struck me in just my life in general is like so much. And just if you really encounter anyone, like people have been through a lot of suffering, and like the mistakes that people have made, and the stuff that they've endured, like almost always is kind of the thing that catapults them into, that those are the tough learning experiences. So it's a strange thing.
I
Yeah.
wanna read, St. Paul again because it's, like, spot on with this. Because this exact thing has been wrestled with in Christianity, because on one hand, you're like, God is omnipotent, like, he's just gonna bring about good into everything. So, like, why worry about evil if he's just gonna make it good?
Mhm.
And that there's some logic in that, right? Because God is and
Mhm.
so St. Paul, this is, Romans chapter 5. I'm gonna read, about 4 verses, so it's starting on verse 20. Uh Moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. But where sin abounded, grace did much more abound, that as sin hath reigned unto death, even so might grace reign through righteousness unto eternal life by Jesus Christ our Lord. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin so that grace may abound? And then St. Paul says, like, no, God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Um, Basically, St. Paul is like, well, okay, I'm going to put it in my terms, how I think of it. Like, you are in the video game that is Scott Adams with his simulation
You
theory.
know,
It,
if I
it
could
doesn't
interject,
matter. It
if I
doesn't
could,
matter if it's a simulation. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because of the subjective experience thing that I talked about. Like, whatever it is, we are in it. Like, it all that matters is like how much do we think it matters? How much do we care about the it that we're in? And who do we want to be while we're in the it, whatever this is, whether it's a simulation, a fart in the cosmic ether, like whatever it is. Like the question is like, who are we gonna each be? Like, who are you gonna be? Who am I gonna be? And so like, if you choose to be a villain, like then God will still figure that out, how to like.
Mhm.
But like the problem is that that's then your part in the story. Like Cain's part in the story is that he killed his brother. Judas's part in the story is that he betrayed and killed, he betrayed Jesus, and then hung himself. Or yeah. Um, so it's like that's the question. Really, the question is like, who do we each want to be in the story? And now maybe we think, oh, the story doesn't matter, but I think that's the bullshit. I think that's the illusion that the story doesn't matter. I have a
Yeah,
feeling that what we're participating in right now matters way more than we each individually can even begin to fathom. I don't know why I have that intuition, but yeah.
I think we're in very important times. Yeah. And and just in general, like this, that there are that our experiences are meaningful in that way and stuff. Yeah, so there's the whole thing about like demonization and sin is one thread we could go down, and then the whole topic of like Gnosticism and because that I think connects back to, like I mentioned Steiner, and I think it's the same dichotomy of like the Luciferic Gnostic escapist kind of impulse and the kind of habitualizing, stabilizing, um, concretizing aspect, and that we need, or like the heaven and earth aspect, is the same way to think about it, such that I do think we need that kind of, like you were talking about with Jesus, we have to be able to like buck the trend and like speak against the status quo, and like for our like we have to be able to like stand alone and disagree or something, but if you go too far in that, then you're just like trying to escape all of the sort of material constraints and like ascend into heaven in this kind of irresponsible way. It's like you're like, what about your relations? Like I don't know. So in that sense, like that's what I think is uh also the so in the process of like demonization or kind of othering, it's like that's the a switch up, which happens through Christ, is that like in the encounter and the relationship with these various things, like Gnosticism, for example, like we see that it does participate in the proper body in some way, but if it tries to take over, and like that's kind of a more like cancerous type of thing.
Like a false idol, basically. Like, if you put the thing like you were talking about, astrology in this way too, that if you start making astrology like the center of your life, right?
Yeah, I think that's maybe what I was saying at the time, that it can be unhelpful. Yeah, yeah, like if you're always, I don't know if that's what I was saying or not, but yeah, it's a good point that like astrology, I think that's kind of what was up with like paganism or the Greek understanding of astrology to some extent, is that like we worship the stars, but really I think the Christian switch up on that is that they reveal a higher will, and that they're more like angels or messengers of God, and they're part of this orderly hierarchy, which eventuates in like, the type of communal dynamics that we're talking about with Christianity, like the type of sort of I don't know, the loving God, like I don't, and so that's important with astrology, and that like people, it's always important that we try and see through it to a higher will and stuff. Yeah.
But trying to understand the spirits of the age, I think, is a way of trying to understand God and trying to, like, relate to the highest, but through those intermediary spirits of what's happening and why is it happening and what is God's will for us and why, all those things.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Like we have to be, just like Jesus knew all the stuff about Judaism and the Pharisees and stuff, and he like knew how to talk with them. You have to be in touch with the times, you know? And yeah, so like studying these various historical narratives, like even kind of taking it away from, or I don't know, I guess, yeah, astrology, that's kind of one way I would think about it, is that like you don't want to get stuck reading about, you know, the cycles and stuff. It would be like studying the spirits of the age, like without recognizing how it applies to your own. Like we have to apply the astrology as well. Like people can just get into it kind of casually or something. I don't know. I see it more of as like a spiritual practice in that way. But another thing that comes to mind just to say about astrology is that like I really like. Rudolf Steiner's anthropology, which is like, his understanding of the nature of the human being, where you have physical body, etheric body, astral body, and then ego, or like the I, the Christ in you, kind of like, and you can kind of divide that into the astral body and the ego being the spirit, and the etheric body and the physical body being like the body, and or like the earth, spirit, and heaven and earth. And in that way, one other thing that's relevant with astrology, and so that's also Lucifer and Armon in his cosmology, where and he also incorporates the teachings of like Eastern spirituality in a certain way. Um, with he talked about the Buddha, like what the Buddha taught was basically like to spiritualize slash redeem slash tame the astral body, which would be like this kind of layer of your various psychological drives and desires and feelings. So if you think about a lot of the saints and stuff, or like the Buddhas, and they've achieved this kind of mastery of their various impulses and complexes are integrated around the, like they don't get taken over by any of these sub things, like they can feel, they can enact, or they can work with them, but they don't get taken over by them, so it's like that's an interesting thing about astrology too, is that I think it's like, that way where it's connected to the astral body, and like this is what it's meant by like I was talking about the Gnostics and like the Luciferic kind of desire to go into heaven. It's like that has to be tamed and kept in its place, and like so does the kind of habitualizing impulse. And that if we can kind of stand above and like keep these two in their proper domains, and not like that's a yeah, that's what I've been very interested in with, like, I don't know, it strikes me as coherent, and I don't remember where this thread started, but that's what, I guess, another thing about astrology, which is like how I see it fitting in, you know?
How do you think of AI or LLMs in relation to all of this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's crazy because like it's a crazy thing because Steiner talked about how in our time we face the incarnation of Ahriman, which is like this habitualizing kind of, it's also like we can see it in materialism. Materialism is like the influence of Ahriman, let's say. It's like the Luciferic spiritual stuff that doesn't exist. It's just materialism and like systems thinking and stuff like that. Uh, so he would talk about, like, he had this line which I always remember, where he said, "In the future, people will carry around little devices in their pockets with extremely high harmonic intelligence." And he said this in like he was contemporaneous with Jung, so this was over 100 years ago, and it's so that's kind of how I think about it, is that AI is like, just like we have to tame this kind of Gnostic individualism of modernity, the kind of postmodern craziness, we also have to like we have to and he would map it to like the beast, which the system of the beast and stuff, and how he
How do you spell Armin? It's not a term I'm familiar with.
Ahr uh, Iman. It's also another word that I would use is Yaldabaoth, like the kind of uh, the tyrant creator of. It's like it's very much associated with physicality and the material. So it's like Yaldabaoth is in Gnostic mythology. You have, excuse me, you
Okay,
have
wait, did you say Ahrmin?
Iman.
Armin. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
So, like, he said that the task of our time, or like the kind of battle of our time, is basically Sophia versus Arma, or Michael, like the Michael.
Saint Michael the Archangel,
Yes,
defend
versus.
us in battle.
Yeah, yeah, and Michael, like, he would associate that with the kind of, it's more of like a redeemed Lucifer kind of thing, and it goes with, like, spiritual science, where science, like, the whole Gnostic, empirical, personal investigation of things, like, that the redemption of that is to, like, kind of, to spiritual, like, to make spiritual science is what Steiner talked about a lot, and how this is, like, the spiritualization of materialistic science is like this kind of balancing function where we can't understand medicine in a materialistic way. We have to understand the spiritual aspect of medicine, and you can see this in psychology as well. It's analogous. So
With medicine, that's a really interesting. So little of medicine is focused on, let's say, spiritual or socio yes, social psychological health. Even so here's what I mean. Even psychology within medicine, like more and more psychology within medicine is teaching people techniques for self I don't know, self-management, I would say, like emotional regulation, uh setting up habits in their daily life. Like all these things that we took for granted. It's interesting as more and more problems arise in the medical field from all these things that we took for granted. Like the natural balance of the physical and the spiritual and the sociological that we had, as those things are out of whack, out of balance, medicine is being asked to take on more and more and more, and they're under equipped for the job. So if, for example, like let's say you have someone who's obese and anxious and depressed and they have diabetes and high blood pressure, primary care, like the primary care provider has 15 minutes with that person. And it's like you can't even begin to address their depression or like get into the social like it's and no wonder like we just want to throw pills at something.
yeah, yeah.
Is something I think about a lot. It's like
It's like a materialistic approach. It's where I posted a video recently called "The Red Pill," which is about this very topic, and um, because uh, and I think a kind of interesting aphorism is maybe to say that like all pills are from heaven, because if you think about a pill, it's kind of like injecting a code onto a computer. It's like it's this thing, and we create it with our mind, our spirit. Like it we medicine is spiritual, like it's it's magic, it's healing.
it is magic, man. It is alchemy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think that that's, yeah, like, it's really important that we stop thinking about that we understand, like, the magic of medicine and, like, what kind of stuff, and I think that the kind of devolution of psychology into just psychiatry nowadays, where everything is a fucking pill, like, you've talked about this, excuse my language, like, everything is you've talked about this before about how, like, antidepressants and stuff, like, no, you need to take a spiritual approach to depression and stuff. You have to go through the U-shaped journey, the death and rebirth Christ event, and it's,
Yeah.
um and also something you said there really kind of, stuck out to me in an interesting way where, like, the personal aspect of medicine, like, what if we conceptualize, like, how do you heal a family, and how do you use medicine or, like,
Mm.
magic in this way I'm describing it, where to heal a community or a nation or
Yeah.
something, and
And well, yeah, every that's a great point. Is that like what is the medicine at the level of the family? What is the medicine at the level of a church or a community? What is the medicine at the level of a nation? Oh man,
yeah, yeah, and I think
physician, heal thyself.
yeah, and Christ is the great healer. I've heard that said before, and like the church used to be a hospital, and like the hospitality, is like it's just like doing these rituals and stuff is also a type of kind of medicine. It's like nourishment as well for, for people's spirit and stuff. And I don't know. I think that's just such an important topic, really. Like the just that people try and see through materialistic medicine to the spirits, which are really creating the pills and stuff.
You know, in some ways, I think our shaman, our cultural shaman for many years was Hollywood. Like that was the cultural like this is who we are. This is we got to get our spirits in line. This is Titanic is how
You
we
can
bring
imagine.
the male and the female back together, the masculine and the feminine back together through the Hollywood
Yeah.
like shaman. And the problem is that shaman has lost his powers.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the new medicine is.
Yeah. I mean, I think storytelling like that, like movie magic, that's a good connection there, like and the power of narratives and stuff, you know? Yeah.
Like I know on one hand, I know the cultural medicine is Christ.
Yeah, it
But
it
but
makes me
also but also like I am deeply distrustful of the idea of the arena becoming overtly Christian. Like I am deeply distrustful of that idea. Like Christian, like just like the Christian nationalism frame. Um,
mhm.
because every time in history where Christ gets wielded as a tool, it's like the ring of power, man. It's like, oh, we have the right Arenic framework. Let's just set up the right institutions in the name of,
It's funny you
eh,
should say the Ring of Power because I was just about to mention, The Lord of the Rings and how it's kind of like it's an inherently Christian story in a sense, and then, like so that's one thing that comes to mind, like, people have to make kind of variations on the story which help us to better understand the story, and I think ultimately that's through our personal like, the way that I show up as a Christ-like person or not, like, I'm contribute it's like I can be an example or I strive to be an example that people can, like, compare themselves with, and that kind of has the same influence of, like, seeing a movie, as it were, but yeah, to make those stories and stuff, and I agree that, like, an institutional kind of Christian nationalism would be no good, although I do think, like, America is an interesting case in this regard because it's got this idea of unity and multiplicity kind of baked into it, you know, and like the freedom of the individual to some extent, and so there's something there, like with regard to just like these kind of implicit Christian values being like baked into government and stuff like that. But
yeah, right now we're having a negotiation in like this Minneapolis situation. Right now, it's the situation is something like when the national body is taking certain action that the local body overwhelmingly disproves of, what's the reconciliation of that? Like, is it's the localism versus the nationalism,
mhm,
and it's going to be very interesting how that gets shaken up and negotiated.
mhm,
Um, yeah, I don't really want to talk, but like that is it's a conflict of principalities that the values of one level of the hierarchy are not matching, are not congruent with the values of a different level of the
mhm.
hierarchy.
Yeah, this is I think it's a good example actually of like how these sort of narratives and interpretive frameworks can be helpful for understanding this type of stuff because like I look at that and I just see Lucifer fighting Armon instead of getting along. Like where you have the institution and the kind of authority structure of the collective governmental body of like it's no one person, it's kind of this machine, and sure enough they're going to be using AI governance soon, and so that's the connection with Armon and AI and stuff. But um and it's them versus the crazy postmodernists who are like the individuals essentially, like versus because you can't there has to be proper relationship between the collective and the individual, so like right now we're the system of the beast is or something like that is like this kind of harmonic impulse to have a totalizing system like totalitarian kind of AI governance, and we anyway, I don't know. There was something else I was going to say to what you were saying there, but I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. But it's just all those connections, all those relationships at those greater levels of principality are being renegotiated or are breaking down. You know what I mean? So like the way the US and Europe are constituted or have related for 70 years is changing, and US and Venezuela and all these different, but also like what's the relationship between the national government and the states and the state and the local community,
Mm.
um, and that's echoed all the way down, like, what's the relationship of a husband and a wife, or what's the relationship of, people to a local community of the people, like, do you know your neighbors and all that, and, yeah, it's all those things are being renegotiated right now, or being figured out, and how long does the age of it is it 1,000 years that we gotta deal with this? The age of Aquarius? Is it 1,000 years?
No, I think this is just a rough transition, and particularly right now, actually, tomorrow, Neptune changes signs into Aries, all right? And it takes 144 years to go around the zodiac. So it's completing a thing tomorrow, and it's going to be starting a new cycle. And Neptune has to do with kind of ideals and fantasies and dreams and stuff like that. And then spirituality as well, like kind of mystical oneness. And but then also Saturn is about to move into Aries as well, completing a 30-year cycle around the zodiac. And they're going to meet up, Saturn and Neptune, at 0 degrees, the very first degree of the zodiac. All right. So that's the way that Neptune is starting this 144-year cycle. It's like, so there's a big kind of, and so that conjunction will happen on February 20th. And, and I, and I think that, and the last time it happened was when in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell, right? And that's when, so with Neptune being kind of the ideals and dreams, and Saturn being the way we structure, it's kind of has to do with tradition and like I wouldn't describe it as more harmonic, where Neptune is more luciferic, and like um, so it's kind of actually a conjunction of opposites in a sense, where you have it's kind of representing the dreams slash ideals which govern the government and the structure of the society, right? So, like with 1989, we had capitalism kind of winning out over communism. That one took place in Capricorn, so it was very much about like money and um and authority and structure and stuff. So now I think there's going to be a very much because Aries is all about new beginnings, like the first degree of the zodiac. So there's going to be a new ideal governing which governs in general, like governing kind of the like the Saturnian power structures and traditions, and like I would associate Saturn most with like banks, courts, and institutions, and so um yeah, so that's like I think that yeah, it's a big transitionary period right now. And but to answer your question about the age of Aquarius, I think that that's a 2,000-year period or plus or minus a bit. And there's like a transition period. And um but Aquarius could be like two things. It could be kind of a, I don't know, there's a dichotomy of kind of technology and kind of the collective stuff, and then there's a thing about like the divine individual. Um, so yeah, hopefully we can get like through the the dying breaths of the old system, without too much violence, and the Saturn Neptune conjunction Aries. Aries is also a martial, like ruled by Mars. It's kind of it can be aggressive and violent and stuff. Where so one way could be kind of like the not like the ideal of it's like a heroic ideal, when it's like a heroic nation. So it could be nationalistic in a sense. Yeah, there's so many threads that we could talk about here, like of the various things we've been discussing. But I'm curious to hear what you're thinking. Um,
Yeah, no, I do think we live in um, unprecedented times, and a way that I've been thinking about this that I think really is unique in history are the masculine and feminine spirits being more divided than at any point in history that I know of. I know of a lot of strange periods in history where, for example, the Roman Empire was held together by basically alliances and relationships with outside empires and parties, and it's very strange for a while. And other strange times in history, but where we are right now, I think is perhaps best constituted by a split of the feminine and the masculine. And those 2
yeah,
things,
I think
have
that's
they've been
yeah,
drifting apart, I think, probably for about I mean, it's probably happened for longer, but for the last 10 years, this split has been really, clearly direct, and I'm trying to figure out how to even approach that topic. It's a minefield.
yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, I think the best way maybe would be to blow it up into cosmic terms where you have heaven and earth, and like
mhm,
a symbol on incarnational thinking is like, it's connecting the masculine and the feminine properly in terms
mhm,
of like the church and marriages and stuff like that. And just in our bodies, where I would talk about eurythmy as this kind of action of connecting heaven and earth. It's this ability we have to do that with our speech to incarnate our meaning and stuff. And um uh but diabolos, would be to set these poles apart. It's Lucifer and Armon fighting rather than like I think Lucifer and Armon can kind of be thought of as like a fallen version of the left and right brain and the masculine and the feminine, actually, where I think the feminine is the left brain, which is supposed to be kind of receptive to the right brain in a sense, and in a sense, it's really a reciprocal
y
relationship, but
yeah, I think of
it's a
I've been thinking
reciprocal.
about it lately in terms of the vertical and the horizontal, um, where the vertical is like the connection to God, but you could think of hierarchy in that way, or authority, or, mastery, excellence, like excellence in something, in any pursuit. So you have a hierarchy of that pursuit, all the way up to God would be the perfection of that, and the feminine being the horizontal, sorry, the feminine being, um, we have to, include, we have to take care of, we have to make sure that the gifts of God are, brought forth to all the people, and all the people are invited in, and invited to the banquet, so to speak. And, those 2 things seem to be somewhat severed. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, there's a it's very tricky thing, I think, like, there's also a way in which I would see yeah, no, I think that that's our correct mapping, but there's also a way in which I would see the horizontal as, like, the, uh the no, I think that's, yeah, you got it right there, I think. And um in that sense, oh man, it's just such a big thing. Like, I guess what I would say is that, like, if the vertical is also like the thing that organizes the multiple, in a sense, then like uh that
But
goes.
there is a I mean, there is a difference biblically speaking between, let's say, a Tower of Babel, which is the masculine, like, engineering mind saying, like, "We can together, we can just make the perfect thing up to God," versus, like, the alternative of that would be, like, the planting of a seed. It's actually like the alternative would be, like, the masculine lowering itself to serve in the garden, to, like, plant, and basically the growing up to heaven is entirely from God. So in effect, yeah, yeah, so God is, like, the one who's drawing the tree up towards heaven, and it's at his time, his grace, and so I see kinda 2 things happening simultaneously. I see the masculine basically saying, like, "This it's gonna be this way, and this is the way it's gonna do it," and we have the technology and the power to do it because, we are more advanced than ever before, and we're gonna keep out the bad, and we're only gonna have the good, and we have all the technology to do it, and that's somewhat related to the immigration stuff. And then on the feminine side, I see, like, everybody's the same, everybody's invited, everybody's equal, barriers are evil, borders are evil, um, you know, yeah, that we should all just be innocent and simple and
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm,
or if I could interject, I actually think that that's kind of like that's like the fallen inversion state where, the like, I was trying to what I would say is that, like, in the Armand Lucifer framing,
mhm,
then, Armand would be like the left brain, like the kind of orderly systems mentality and stuff, but the, um and Lucifer would be the right brain, like, seeing these kind of patterns everywhere and, like, crossing boundaries as well, and, uh, like, the kind of personal liberty aspect of things, which would be like the Whore of Babylon, and Armand would be like the system of the beast. And but when we when we kind of see the higher unity and we put these things in their proper uh, way of being, then I think the left brain would be more like Sophia or the divine feminine, like the moon, also like reflecting the light of the solar masculine, like divine masculine sort of thing, where um so the kind of institute like the institutional sort of really um like a system type of thing would be actually like a fallen feminine, as opposed to um like, I see this with the churches actually to some extent, that like a masculine priest is one that has that kind of fatherly coming from heaven aspect, and that the church should be feminine. And in this regard, I think there should be a lot more like priestesses kind of actually. I know that's a kind of a heretical.
John just throwing a bomb at the end of our boom.
I was trying to not, I don't know. I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone. I just think that that makes sense. Is like the the church as the bride of Christ should be like this. The
We
priests,
call them nuns, Jonathan,
yeah,
N-U-N.
yeah. I mean, the priests. I don't know. Yeah, they should. I don't know. Like, I think a true kind of masculine fatherly priest is someone who's having spiritual experiences and like mediating them to the world and stuff. Um, and then the more relational. family style values of like organizing the group and stuff is kind of this feminine disposition in a way. So there's definitely a place for both in the church, I would say. But um and yeah, so just in I think the split that we have in our times between these two extremes, and we have the beast killing the whore as we speak, where like this kind of free individualism, like in Minneapolis, is the beast killing the whore, kind of, and um, and and so, but what we need is to see the transcendent unity, and like through Christ, we elevate these poles into their proper relational mode of like kind of lordship and priestly masculinity and like fatherly lowering oneself, and then on the feminine side, like rather than a devouring mother, we have a kind of someone that holds space. Like there's a lot that could be said about the divine feminine, I think, and I think embodiment is relevant to that and stuff. Like we have to get out of the jargon stuff.
Next time we talk, I'd be interested in your thoughts on Marian apparitions. I don't know if you've kept I don't know if you like have kept abreast of that or aware of that, but it's been a remarkable thing really since the discovery of the New World, and it hasn't only been in the Americas, but only for the last 500 years. There have been these multiple accounts of Marian apparitions that have been independently validated, verified by multiple people. Many accounts have not been independently verified, so are not validated by the church. Um, but if you are like beyond the reasonable doubt threshold that this was real, this was a thing,
I
you
think
know?
so. Yeah,
Yeah, and so like it's very interesting to me that we have Mary, the Mother of God, appearing, and some of them are more recent, and some of the things that she has said to people are really pertinent to the present time. So I don't know, maybe I could do some research too
yeah.
on that the next time we meet.
I'd be interested to talk more
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have like a whole lot to say about it, but I definitely think that like I take those things seriously. And Mary and the Divine Feminine was a big part of me, like taking uh getting into Christianity kind of, and just understanding that kind of that mode of, because I think you see it in Christ as well, like Christ. And there's some people like James Tabor who would argue that Mary was really a big influence on Christ's like spirituality. Like an example, if I could just toss this in real quick, because it's interesting. I think you might find it interesting that the right before the time of Jesus, there was another guy who like was like, I'm gonna be the Messiah, and he did the whole thing that people were expecting, which was that the Messiah would take on the system by force and win in a war or something like
Oh,
that.
that was I think Yosef Ben Sirach or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and this was in the city right next to Jerusalem. So like Mary watched basically everyone in this town get crucified by the Roman Empire and the place be burned to the ground. She's like, all right, the kingdom of heaven is not to be taken by force, and like there's this certain like it's like a non-violent approach, which I can only imagine she would be, you know, kind of instilling with Jesus to some extent. I mean, it's a big topic. Like, if we really take seriously the terminology of like the Mother of God, and I don't know. I was just trying to say that it was a big thing for me as well. Like, kind of after my crazy psychedelic experiences, like it was a more sociological experience of spirituality for me than kind of anything else. Is that there was the spirit in the wind, and it would kind of talk to me, and like and like this very kind of um, like the more I could kind of quiet myself and open myself in this kind of Marian way, like that's how the Word of God is born in you. And I think that uh, it's a big topic that there could be a lot, like, and I think actually Aquarius kind of is associated with the divine feminine in this way. Like you've got the Grail, like and the Grail is kind of a symbol of the feminine, like this water, like and have the star card here from the tarot. This is the tarot, the star card. Hopefully you don't get demonetized or like taken down, but probably not. I don't know if not to assume you monetize either. I don't know, but the or that would be a bad thing. Anyway, here you've got the pool of water, and interestingly, in Pisces, the images of the card for that goes with Pisces is things coming out of a pool of water, and then with Aquarius, you have someone pouring into the pool of water. But the reason I bring it up now is that it's obviously a feminine figure, so there's this association, and also the star on top. It's like associated with this the North Star, I think, which is like the Stella Maris, which is associated with Mary as well. And just I think that the whole move into Aquarius, a big aspect of it is kind of a coming to relationship properly with the divine feminine. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Got it. Well, I've got to wrap this up, Jonathan, but it was good talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. Very
So,
much so. I hope to keep it up, and let's not let it be a year again. That was my fault. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, hang out for a little bit. So hold on, I'm just gonna end it.
okay.